Yes, maybe. What does this lead us to if we look this collectively? We see that there is the current range of proposals, the low case and the high case, is still getting us roughly halfway of where we need to be between our business as usual and our abatement pathway. So there is definitely a need for additional efforts. We are not getting there where we want to be and where leaders of the G8 and the MEF countries have said they want to be. And let's have a look at the impact of the economic crisis and to see more exactly what this impact is going to have on overall emissions. Our assumption, if we look at the GDP forecast up to 2020, essentially depict in a global picture a relatively small change between the forecast before the crisis and the current forecast if we look in the 2020 timeframe. It's essentially 1 gigaton of differences. So in the global picture, it doesn't help us too much in terms of the climate challenge. Next picture. But it's interesting to look a little bit more into detail into the split between developed and developing economies. And if we look at the developing countries, which is the upper two graphs, essentially the impact of the recession is not very big. Essentially, it's almost undistinguishable, the BAU emissions in 2007 and in 2009. We think the impact of the recession will be negligible. If we look at developed countries there, the impact of the recession is much more pronounced, and our analysis tells us that approximately in 2020 there could be savings of 1.4 gigatons of developed countries' emissions, which is a good news on the one hand. On the other hand, essentially in the way how the negotiations are being led here, it is only helping developed countries to meet their targets in an easier way and to lessen the requirements for offsetting. But because these are absolute targets, obviously it doesn't narrow the overall gap that we have. Only if developed countries would kind of increase their ambition by 1.4 gigatons, we would really be able to capture the kind of climate benefits of the recession. But under the current political situation, it's unlikely to happen, but we think it's an important point to be made. We maybe go back briefly to this 1.1 idea we are toying with, and I would like to also get some feedback on this, is eventually it would be useful to commission or to give a mandate for a scientific review, maybe IPCC or another entity that is qualified for that, to do a scientific review in the 2011-2012 timeframe of the impact of the recession on developed countries' targets, and then have an early review of these targets, maybe already at the start of the next commitment period, and see if countries could eventually ratchet up their ambition in the light of these targets being easier to achieve. But it's just one of the possibilities we are toying around. Yeah, next picture. And that's in fact the final picture. It's the picture of the beginning, the different pathways, the 550 ppm pathway, the 450 and the 400 ppm pathway. We have depicted the current proposals that are on the table and the low range and the high range of these proposals, and all of them are essentially in the 550 ppm pathway, in that range, the other one on the higher and the lower end of this pathway, but we are still not on track to meet the 2 degrees pathway, and it's very unlikely to be able to get back to a 2 degrees pathway if we don't bend the curve soon enough in the next commitment period. Thank you very much.